Hello and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to revisit a padlock. Now a few videos back I did an unboxing of a padlock I got from eBay with the intention of picking it open on camera. Now it turned out to be the world's easiest padlock to pick and I couldn't figure it out on the video. It was a bit baffling, but it's a lever padlock. And I was actually able to open it with just the tensioner. I put the tensioner in the keyway, turned it around and it opened, which was really disappointing because it was a very nice lock, lots of nice patina, but I had to get to the bottom of it. The only way I thought to do that was to crack it open. Now I've never cracked open a lever lock padlock, so it was a bit of a mission, but this is the result here. As you can see, the rivets, which did look like that, have now been replaced with these brass screws. Which means that we can gut this and find out what was actually wrong with it. But I'll just put the tensioner in, and as you can see now, it no longer just pops open. What happened before was that you put the tensioner in, you turned it around, and the shackle just popped straight up. These are actually sprung shackles. You can just see the spring on it there. That isn't the case anymore. So what I thought we'd do is we'll pick this one again, and yeah, we can gut it and see what's inside. So let me drag the vise over and try and position it somewhere where you get a good view of what I'm doing. And then we'll grab some tools. I've got the same tensioner I used to open it last time. That's a 1.4mm picking wire. Although it's a lot harder to pick open than it initially was, because I literally just had to use the tensioner. It's not a difficult padlock to pick. As you'll see later, there are no false gates in the padlock. But what it does have is it says it's a 6-lever lock, but it's actually 5 active levers. The other lever is a spring to push this shackle up. And what that means is that you have to kind of slide your pick wire under it, because it sits really quite low. A little bit of movement there, a little bit more movement, and we got it open. Yeah, you can just see the spring on that lever. Now that didn't take too long to get it open. Have I got my pick wire stuck in there? Quite possibly. That's just one of the real pains about lever lock picking. There we go. That it can be a real pain to get your tools out once you've got it open. So yeah, it didn't take too long to get that picked open, but in my experience, lever locks, unless they've got false gates, they are quite straightforward to pick. So anyway, let's lock him back up. And it's actually worth noting, a lot of lever padlocks, you have to pick them closed again, so you put the tensioner in, but just the other way around, put the pick wire in. And sometimes you've got to pick a couple of the levers, other times you've got to pick all of the levers to pick it back closed, or you can use the key, of course. But with this one, you just push the shackle down, and then the tensioner is all that you need to throw the bolt and get it locked up again. But as you can see, it won't open now with the tensioner. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'll speed this bit up because it does take some time to undo the screws and also to lever off the front of this padlock, because yeah, they go together really quite well. Anyway, I'll speed up this section and we can have a look inside this Squire Defiant. Right, we're almost at the point that this cover is going to pop off. There is just one more screw. This one doesn't actually go all the way through. This one just connects the first 2 plates. I mistakenly drilled and tapped it, but it turned out in the end I didn't need to. Now I've got to do this in stages because this padlock isn't like other lever padlocks. Once you take this cover off, the insides just pretty much explode everywhere. It's an absolute pain to reassemble. It's going to take me some time to do it, but I'd like to show you the insides of it so you can just see if you're an interest, but also I can show you what the actual problem was with this padlock. Before we get started, it's the first time I've drilled one of these off, and I was trying to be really careful not to damage the patina on the front of this lock, because I don't know if you remember, I'll put a photo up actually of the old lock. I'll just put it over there so you can see. But the original lock had a really nice kind of orange rusty patina, which I really liked, and that attracted me to the lock. But when I was using a cutting wheel grinder to get these rivets off this front cover, in a few places I cut into the patina. I tried to avoid it, but yeah, and it just kind of ruined it because I cut into the steel. So of course we had some really bright steel cut marks on it, which spoilt that patina. So what I did is I took a wire wheel to it on a bench grinder. I got it all back to shiny metal, and then I used a blacking fluid, or bluing fluid if you're American, and what that does is it kind of uses a chemical reaction to if it's good quality steel, new steel, it makes it a uniform black colour with a slight blue tinge. If it's older steel like this one is, it just gives it a really nice patina, and I actually quite like the new patina. Anyway. Right, so I'm going to prise off this plate, and then the whole thing will explode, I imagine. But it'll be interesting for you to see that happen. And there we go, that's the plate off. And let's see if I can get it off without anything exploding. It's unlikely. Oh, there we go, that worked pretty well. So you can't see the levers working, because what holds the levers in place and means that the padlock can operate is there's this pin here and this pin here, which is actually stuck in there. It probably will come out. That goes through there somewhere, and then the levers are all kind of under compression with the springs just here, and that holds everything in place. But of course, once you pull this top plate off, those pins are no longer held in place by these two holes here and here, and that means that they just kind of spring around and do what they want to do. So what I'll do is just arrange this a bit neater, and then we can take the levers out, have a look at everything, and I can explain to you exactly what was wrong with this padlock. So that's the first lever there. And it looks, oh no, so that's not the first lever, that's part of like a sort of, that's the bolt there, and the bolt is held on with this plate, and there's another plate underneath all of these levers, which I'll show you in just a minute. So it's like a little carriage for all of the levers, and that moves freely. As far as I understand it, with a lot of other lever padlocks, you've just got one of these that's, you know, right at the bottom of the pack, and is held in place by pins which are fixed into the bottom of the padlock, so you can see everything working. But of course this one relies on that front plate to hold everything in place. So I'll put that one up there. We've got the first lever there, no false gates on that one. Second lever there, once again no false gates. I cleaned up the internals of this padlock when I took it apart, so that's why it all looks quite nice. That is the lever. And you can see that the levers here, the spring is facing up, as these ones were, and this one the spring is facing down, because this is the actual lever which tensions the shackle, so that when you do get it picked, that lever pushes up the shackle, and then the shackle springs out quite nicely, which is a nice little touch. But you don't have to pick this one at all, so it just sort of sits in there to act as a spring for the shackle. So then we've got that lever there, no false gates, that lever there, no false gates, and the very last lever there, once again, no false gates. And if we look into the lock there, that's the back of the carriage, that's the front of the carriage, which holds the bolt, which goes through that centre hole. And then you would have this pin here, which holds that carriage and the lever pack in place, moves this across, and that of course is what locks the lock. As it moves across like that, it locks the lock. Let me just grab the key if I can find it. So on a lever lock, you've got this last stump there is what usually throws the bolt, but on this lock, actually the first and the last ones actually throw it. So when you put your key in, let me try and do this. and you put your key in, it goes to the back, it goes in that little hole there, and it locks in there. So as you turn the key, that plate, and also this one, because that one would be sort of fixed in that position, and then the lever pack in between, that whole cassette would slide back to the open position. This lever, which is, you know, pushing upwards with that spring, then releases the shackle, and then when we lock it, of course, the opposite happens. So once you put the key in, yeah, you turn that, and then the whole system locks again like that. Now, when I took this whole lock apart, the whole reason I'd taken it apart, gone through all this trouble, was because the lock wasn't operating properly. If you watch that first video, you'll see that in action, but I couldn't figure out why, so I thought the problem was internal. It actually turned out that the problem had nothing to do with the lock at all. All of the problem was down to the key. So this is the original key that came with it. I've actually made this key since, which I'll speak about in a minute. Now you can see there the tensioning stump on the far side is actually snapped off, but it was the same. It was about the same height as this one, and what was happening was that you opened the lock like that, the shackle opened, and then you closed the lock, and I think what had happened is the key had worn down over time with lots of use. And instead of, let me just shut that shackle, instead of throwing that bolt all the way over, as you can see there, and fully locking against the shackle, because that shaft, that part of the key there was a little bit too short, it wasn't quite throwing the bolt all of the way. And what that meant, if I can find the tensioner that I was using a minute ago, bear with me. This was the tensioner that was able to open it. So what I did in that first video is I stuck this in to tension it, and the whole system wasn't fully locked. You know, it hadn't slid all the way over to the left here. There was this slight gap between this kind of locking pull and the shackle. So when I put my tensioner in, it was able to pick up that little stump and just open the lock completely. And then of course I put the key in, locked it back up again, but once again this carriage didn't move all of the way to the left. So I'd gone through all of this trouble, I'd cleaned up the padlock, I'd reassembled it, and I was still getting the same problem. And that's when I started looking at the key as the suspect. And of course, even though we've got this bit missing, which had been broken off during my troubles, I think that the key was so badly worn that it wasn't able to operate the lock properly anymore, which left it vulnerable. I mean, this is quite a tough lock. It's probably lived quite a busy life outside and secured all sorts of valuables, but as the key wore down over time, it suddenly made it an unsecure lock. So what I was able to do is I popped down to the locksmith, and I was able to get a load of these blanks, and then fashion this key from that. Now I kind of did it by eye with that one there, and what I did is I made this part of the key that moves the bolt across. I made it as long as possible. I made it, if I just compare it, so the old key, that bit that's broken off was about the size of this one here, and as that goes in, you can just see there's a bit of a gap there between the bottom of the key, see it just there, and the keyhole, and that's where it was worn. So what I did with the new key is I made that front part and the rear part as long as I could, so it would clear. So you can see there we've got no gap. If I can get you in focus, just there, we've got barely any gap at all, just enough clearance to get the key in. And what that means, of course, is that now that that part is longer, it was able to fully throw the bolt to the open position, and then fully throw it again to the locked position, which meant that this lock was properly locked, and I could no longer just put the tensioner in to access this little piece here. I don't know what to call it, for want of a better word. You usually call it the bolt, but it's kind of a cassette almost. It travels, just see it locates like that. Yeah, and the whole thing moves backward, moves this locking pull back, and then opens the shackle. But yeah, what that meant was with this new key, this lock now operates properly. So I mean, in some respects, it was a bit of a shame that I had to take the whole lock apart, you know, just to find out that it was the key that was at fault. But really, there was no way to know that. I could have just started with a key. But part of me also, the part that likes taking shit apart, like a lot of you guys, I'm sure, just really wanted to dissect this lock and see the inside of it. So yeah, glad I did that. It's quite an interesting mechanism. As I say, it's an absolute pain in the arse to reassemble. I'll show you for why in just a minute. That's the cassette there, front and back of it, that slides back and forward. There's the bolt in the middle holding the two together, and that's the locking pull with a double locking mechanism, which probably makes this really quite secure. The reason it's a pain in the arse to assemble, which I'll have to do after the video, there's no way I'm doing that on video, is that you've got to get this piece in, and then you take these two stumps and put them in there. And then, of course, you start putting the levers back in. But the levers are obviously sprung levers. So you put the lever back in there. And the lever spring sits in that little gap. You can just see it just there. But, of course, once we stack up all of these levers and I try to put this top piece in, the bolt needs to go through that gap just there. And, of course, as soon as I lift that lever up, you see it's just under spring tension there. What happens is these posts, they just start moving around and they tend to spring out. So I've not found a really good way to assemble this. Basically, I have to put all the levers in there and then play around with this until the whole thing is pushed tight. And then once I've got it like that, I've got to quickly get this plate and then the top plate, clamp the whole thing together in order that it doesn't all spring apart. I think the last time I assembled this lock prior to this video, it probably took me about 20 minutes, half an hour to do that, and these posts just kept wobbling about, and they kept kind of popping out of these holes. It was a real pain in the ass. Anyway, I'm not going to subject you to that. I'll do that after this video, but anyway, that's the internals of this rather nice Squire Defiant. That's the top plate there. And yeah, it's been a really interesting project. I've really enjoyed it, and now I've got a lock that I can sort of peek to the insides of, which is always nice. If you've enjoyed this video, I'll leave a DMAC logo up there so that you can subscribe for similar content to this. And thanks for not picking with me today. Well, I suppose I did pick, but thanks for disassembling with me today. It's been a fun journey. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.